What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we just wrapped up a very busy week 6 in college football, and we have several games to cover. Let's dive in with Alabama, which is the game that just ended. Alabama survives against Texas A&M 24-20. I have a lot of thoughts, but I want to start with you, Daniel. What are your thoughts on Alabama as we dive into week 6?
First off, I just am kind of, obviously we're surprised that this being such a close game. We both picked Alabama to cover big, even with Jalen Milroe being the quarterback. Obviously Bryce Young, game time decision. He ends up being withheld from the game. We'll see how that materializes in the coming weeks. But Jalen Milroe is a different kind of quarterback. I think that he can, complete passes and do that, but I think it's at a much lower efficiency rating, and it's time for, the offense needs to be catered to what he does best, which is running the ball. And I think that if they would have done a little bit more of that today, they may have protected some of those turnovers, because there's 3 turnovers by Jalen Milroe, 2 fumbles and a pick. And those led to 17 points off turnovers, which you look at the final score, this one's 24-20. Bama may kind of walk or run away with this game if they're not turning the ball over like they did, because Texas A&M was definitely taking advantage of those plays. Jahmyr Gibbs, again, looks elite, as he's looked in every game so far this season. Best player on their offense, outside of when Bryce is healthy. So,
Yeah. Tonight he was the best.
Yeah.
So I thought Stuart Mandel said this really well on Twitter. He said, we'll see if that A&M touchdown causes Alabama to deviate from its game plan of run the Jalen Hurts freshman year offense. And that's what they should have done the entire game. You and I were talking about it before the show. I was baffled at the amount of times Alabama was putting Jalen Milroe in obvious passing situations and trying to run the normal offense when, I tweeted before the beginning of the game, Alabama could run the ball. If they don't run the ball 50 times, they're doing it wrong. Like, I think they could not pass the ball at all and probably win this game. Like, their most explosive plays came from the run game. I just didn't understand putting a guy on the biggest stage in a position where he's uncomfortable with Jalen Milroe. With 4 turnovers, Alabama tried again and again and again to hand the game to Texas A&M. But on the flip side of this, Daniel, A&M took none of those opportunities and decided to hand the game right back to Alabama. $95 million for a comeback at the pylon, and the ball didn't even reach the goal line. That was the play call.
You and I talked about this right after the game ended. That's a good play call if you're preserving a field goal opportunity. That's not the best play call, but that's a better play call for that situation. This is the end of the game. You throw it to the middle of the field or somewhere abouts where not only one guy has a chance, but if it's tipped, another guy has a chance or something. You're not worried about an interception. You want to have a ball in play, give your guys an opportunity. More guys with the opportunity, the better. For that kind of a play, a touchdown is all that you can do. So if this was 23-20 and they were just trying to score and go ahead, yeah, absolutely. Throw it, like you said, maybe a fade to protect it, or this was okay for that as well. But, you're not protecting a field goal. You're trying to score a touchdown. This was not the right play call in that moment. I'm surprised that's what they did. They got opportunity after opportunity, like you said, because obviously there's the pass interference in the end zone that got that last play to happen at the 2-yard line. So I'm surprised that a quarterback guru, offensive mind like Jimbo Fisher, that he's just, praised for being, this is what the great play call was at the end of the game. I know that everybody nitpicks play calls. It just seems so obvious that like that type of call is not what you do in that scenario.
$95 million for that play call. And But hey, Bama hangs on to win. Look, good teams when they're clunkers. They did do it without Bryce Young. I have a follow-up question about Alabama, but I first want to talk about Tennessee. We'll connect the two in just a second.
Right.
Tennessee goes on the road, 2.5-point favorites against LSU. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast, Daniel just put his face in his hand. 10-2 LSU is technically still on the table.
It looks more formidable now that Alabama does not quite look unbeatable. But yeah, this game, Jacob, it was started off with, LSU winning the toss and electing to receive the kick, and then presuming to give the ball right back on kickoff in the red zone, give it back to Tennessee by Jack Besh fumbling the kickoff on kick return or muffing it. That was just an all-time kind of a, hey, this other team has a phenomenal offense. Let's not help them any, and they helped them right out of the gate. It seemed like from that moment, Tennessee was fine. They were going to be fine all day against LSU. They didn't seem like they were concerned with LSU's offense. Even with Tennessee giving up big, explosive plays this season, LSU is not really the type of offense that's going to have big explosive plays right now with their quarterback situation and their offensive line situation for that matter. So I I think that Tennessee, they just were fine. I felt like they were almost able to sit on it in a way because they know their offense is going to keep putting pressure on LSU. So it's like, hey, this dam will break. We'll just keep doing this. And then sure enough, they just kept building their lead. And then before long, it was like, what are we watching? Like they're dominating them this game. And it was like a slow leak to like a big flood at the end where LSU just they just did not have the players at the end of the game.
This was 37-7 at the end of the third quarter. This is an offense that is known for passing the ball, and rightfully so. Hendon Hooker still had an unbelievable game. He should be, if you're a Heisman voter in your top 5 at this point in the season, if not number 1. He was 17 of 27 for 242 touchdowns. But Tennessee ran the ball today for 260 yards. Again, an offense that is explosive, but they were explosive with the run game today.
Right.
And so I think they showed just how dynamic the offense can be. And Daniel, today they did it without their starting left tackle the whole game. So very, very impressive win on the road against LSU. So let's fast forward a little bit to next week. We're definitely going to talk about this game in our preview episode, but Tennessee plays Alabama next week. It's in Neyland Stadium. Tennessee is at home. Both teams are undefeated. And going into today, I think I would have laid the points, whatever it was, with Alabama. But after watching both teams today, can Tennessee beat Alabama? And I'll have 2 parts to this: with Bryce Young and without Bryce Young. Does your answer change?
I think they can beat them with or without Bryce Young. I think that can happen. I think it's not like far-fetched. Now, before this game, in my brain, the line before either one of these games, before today was played, the line would have probably been in the 2 to 3 score range. I would say between 14.5 to like 17.5 points would be where I would have placed it. Early lines for this week after the final tonight, I saw 10.5.
Was it 10.5? What I saw.
So and at the end of the game tonight, I was starting to think, I was like, I think it might be single digits. So 10.5 right there at the line of being a potential single digit type of spread. I definitely think that Alabama Alabama is the better team as far as talent wise. I think that if Alabama was to run, like they mentioned, the Jalen Hurts offense, or, I've mentioned just run the veer, just run, some read option with your best offensive player that's not Bryce Young, which is Jahmyr Gibbs. and a running quarterback who's got some talent. Just run that. If they did that against Tennessee, I think they have a better chance than trying to do what they did tonight. And if you turn the ball over against Tennessee, I do think Tennessee beats them. They cannot turn the ball over next week. Now, if Bryce Young's playing, I think that they don't have those turnovers because he's a lot more careful in that aspect. He's not going to throw picks, and I think that he's just built more for that. I'm curious. It's gonna be a phenomenal intrigue this week as to what's going to happen. So I do think early lean would still be for Alabama to win the game. I think that's the most logical pick, but absolutely wide open now that Tennessee's playing the way they're playing. The only thing I would be worried about if I was Tennessee is that, reading press clippings and thinking a little too much after the big win against LSU, because Alabama is different than LSU. So they're a different animal. But you've mentioned it prior to that their offense kind of works well to negate a lot of what Alabama likes to do on defense.
Alabama has an extremely strong pass rush. We saw that tonight. A&M had no time to throw the football, and Tennessee just gets the ball out quick. Hendon Hooker really gets the ball out quick, and then when they do have time to throw, they're usually loading up to throw a deep ball. So I think that plays in both ways. Like, I do think you can negate the pass rush early by getting quick throws out. You got to hit them, got to be successful on them to get them to back off. Because if not, if you're not hitting those passes, if you're not getting completions on those, they're going to pin their ears back. Now it's 2nd and 10. Now it's 3rd and 10. And now you're waiting on routes to open up. Now you're really not going to have time to throw the ball. So
Right.
they got to hit those early, but I'm excited to talk about it more, break it down more, because I do think Tennessee has a chance. I think they have a really good chance if Bryce Young's not playing. I would really lean on an Alabama bounce back, and like I'd lay the point. If I find out Bryce Young's playing for sure, I'm probably gonna
Right.
lay the points. just as a principle that Bama, with the best player in the country, probably gonna put
Be
it on them.
explosive on, yeah,
Uh,
probably.
but Daniel, let's talk about another top 2 team in the country with a big line today. Georgia, Deep South's oldest rivalry. Georgia goes in, looked shaky early. Looked like the last 2 weeks. Georgia early comes out the second half. Offense looked coherent. Defense looked good the entire game. They come out, finish, cover, 142-10. Any takeaways from Georgia?
Yeah, like you mentioned, another slow start. So if I'm Georgia, I am concerned going forward. Just the continued, they play Vanderbilt next week, but in a few weeks, I believe they'll have Florida after a bye, and then they start to kind of have a home stretch of their schedule where they do have Tennessee and Kentucky and Mississippi State on the road will be tough. We'll mention them in a few minutes. So those kinds of games, and then especially whenever they eventually play whoever if they make the SEC championship, which we expect, whoever they end up playing there, which would probably be Alabama, you have to be concerned moving forward. This defense isn't what they were last year, but Jacob, I mean, you can see the talent on this defense, and a lot of these young guys are starting to grow together and learn and kind of they're missing less assignments, missing less blocks, that kind of thing. They're not quite the 85 Bears that they were last year, where you could travel anywhere and they're going to stop anybody anytime, which is how it felt last year. This year there is a little bit more give to the defense, but they're still, I mean, among the best in the nation offensively. I'm concerned a little bit about Stetson Bennett at quarterback. I know that, if you talk to any of the national people just in general, they're gonna, you know, eschew you away saying, hey, Bennett won the national championship last year and people need to get off his case and all this kind of stuff. And I agree to a certain extent of questioning his validity as a college quarterback. I do think he's, been solid thus far, but there's a couple plays that Georgia missed, deep shots to Brock Bowers, to Lad McConkey today, where those could have been touchdowns if the ball was placed correctly. Now, those are high if percentage throws too for, competent downfield passers. So those were a little more surprising. I feel like you normally would, hit those in this kind of game. So, Georgia wins 42-10. The running game was the big key in the second half. If I'm Georgia, I am a little concerned at quarterback. I don't think there's any chance that anything happens at quarterback unless there's like an injury of some sort or like a bad loss where it's, of course, all Stetson's fault. I don't really foresee that happening. I don't think that can really happen. Georgia can definitely be beaten, but I don't think it would be solely on Stetson's shoulders. I just think that they might have a higher ceiling with a more competent passer. But it could have just been a couple misses today. I don't know. He did end up having a 60-yard rushing touchdown, which was awesome to see, him run away from guys. But I think this one's probably going to be called the Dajon Edwards game because 2 rushing touchdowns and a reception for a touchdown. Big day for him with Kendall Milton going out. So definitely got some good run today.
I'm with you on, like I hated on Stetson Bennett last year on the pod. Try to give him some love first couple weeks because I'm like, you know what? He's running this offense. It's been called for him like really, really well. Then he looked bad for 2 weeks and he had a slow start today. He's missing wide open deep balls, and it's not like he had a step and you got to fit it into a tight window. I'm talking you have Brock Bowers, the best tight end in a generation, like open by 5 yards.
Right.
So like you just got to get it there. Yeah. And like missing those kind of throws, I think is inexcusable. So I think Georgia to get to where they want, and I think you're splitting hairs when you talk about these top 3 teams especially, but to get to where they want to go, you got to have better play at quarterback. From Stetson Bennett, I think an encouraging thing if you're a Georgia fan is the running game, like you mentioned, looked really, really good today. And that was even a concern the first few weeks is, hey, the passing game looks great. Those running backs aren't looking good. Georgia, known as RBU, and offensive line was doing a pretty good job in pass protection and not a great job run blocking. And that changed today. It changed last week. So I think if you're a Georgia fan, that's encouraging is them running for 300 yards and kind of breaking it open. Second half was pretty old school Georgia.
RBU is back.
We'll see. A couple young guys running at Georgia. So we'll see if that continues. They got Vandy next week, bye game in Florida. So then they got to run at the end of the season where Georgia will be tested. So we'll see if they have fixed everything. The problems that were exposed the last 2 weeks, we'll see if those are fixed at the end of the season. But they got time. When you win, you get to buy yourself time. So to get better. Other games today, TCU, Kansas, battle of undefeated Big 12 teams. TCU, you and I picked them to cover. They do, but we also thought it was a really good line.
Yeah,
and
it was a great line.
They win by 7. So shout out to Kansas, man, because you and I both said in the pod, Kansas is good. Like in my mind, this is not oh, sweet, Kansas finally lost, dropped them from the rankings.
Right.
I know, and at the end of the day, AP rankings don't matter, but gosh, in my mind, I get so frustrated sometimes because I'm like, okay, TCU, you voters had them ranked 17th. Kansas, you had them ranked 19th. So you said TCU is better than Kansas. TCU beats Kansas. Then you say, oh, they lost. You dropped them out. What? That doesn't make any sense. You already said they were better. Like it's like when the number 5 team beats the number 20 team. They fall out of the rankings. It's like, no. You said they were 15.
Yeah, this is about what expected. Yeah.
So shout out to TCU. Won a game a different way. Had to run the ball today. Kansas, Jalen Daniels goes out of the game.
Yeah.
Their backup comes in and plays phenomenal. Bean, I forget his first name. But a lot of Bean memes on Twitter.
Oh no.
But yeah, Bean comes in 16-24, 262, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick in replacement of Jalen Daniels. That's incredible. Right. So the fact that they stayed in this game, TCU, Quentin Johnson finally had his, career breakout game, phenomenal. 206 receiving yards on 14 catches.
Yeah.
1 touchdown, just phenomenal. TCU is legit. They're 6-0. Yeah, it's weeks. If they had a bye, I don't know. I'm like, the record's on here. No, 5-0. 5-0 is TCU. They got a backloaded schedule. They play Oklahoma State next week. I'm going to talk about them here in a second, but any thoughts on TCU Kansas?
Yeah, it was a fun one, and I had it on a second screen. And just when I thought like TCU was about to pull away, Kansas just kept hanging in there and tying it back up, and just I I came away more impressed with Kansas because yeah, you lose your quarterback, and that was probably the only player that most people knew on Kansas's team, and Jalen Daniels, and then you know he gets replaced, and then they still play well. I think it's just a credit to what Lance Leipold has brought there after last year being his first year, and then just really getting some buy-in going into this year. Obviously, what he did at Buffalo was very impressive. So what he's now doing at Kansas, you just love to see it, and especially on a day when College Game Day comes to town for the first time for football. I like that they had a good showing. There's no necessarily moral victories, but it's like what you were saying. They're a good team. It wasn't like watching them, wither away because they played a formidable opponent. It was, hey, this is a classic Big Ten shootout or Big 12 shootout, excuse me. A classic Big Ten shootout would be like, 13 to 10 or 13 to 9.
Illinois and Iowa did that today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't want to talk about that game, but that was ugly and sick. But it was a fun Big 12 game, and it was kind of fun to just see two rivals, I don't want to say blue bloods, but yeah, blue bloods, if you will, just two teams in the Big 12 going at it, similar to what Oklahoma State ended up with later in the evening.
Oklahoma State. They beat Texas Tech today. But man, you seen the stat sheet? You getting the eyes on this game?
I watched the game. I didn't look at the stat sheet. I enjoyed them going back and forth with Texas Tech.
With a backup quarterback. We're not. Oklahoma State was not successful in the red zone.
I hear your tone, Jacob. Your hatred for Oklahoma State is coming out. It's showing.
The most fraudulent top 10 team.
You're so mad that they beat your Baylor Bears last week.
Yeah. Maybe ever. Look,
the numbers don't add up. You just need to have like a bunch of pieces of paper in front of you. Like, this doesn't make sense.
It's the meme from It's Always Sunny where the guy's got like all the strings.
It's like pointing.
It doesn't make any sense. Oklahoma State is, hear me right, they are a good team. But they are not the class of the Big 12. They're not.
Right.
Like, they're not even the best. I don't even think they're a top 3 team in their own conference. They're not a top 10 team. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, they're not a top 10 team. And a response could be, well, okay, well, who would you rank ahead of them?
Yeah.
I feel very confident when I say Oklahoma State is not a top 10 team. Even right now, it's not about wins. It's not about record. They're not a top 10 team. And even by that, I can pick 10 undefeated teams that are better than they are. So,
right.
It's okay. They got something else coming. They got outgained by 100 yards today against Texas Tech. 6 less first downs. Less yards per play than Texas Tech. The success rate was lower than Texas Tech. It's okay. They got it coming next week against TCU. We're going to talk about it. 2 undefeated teams. I'm picking TCU. I'm laying the points. No surprises. Don't care Jacob, what the line is.
We're talking about the Big 12, and we're talking about the class of the Big 12. I mean, it's Texas with Quinn Ewers. That was just the moment he ran out before the game and threw up the hook'em. I was like,
it's over.
But then they just come out
back right then.
And they just come out and they just look like a completely different team. They look like a team that had a shot in the arm, that was confident and believed that they were going to win. There was no skeletons in the closet. And I was very impressed with not just the win, but the nature of the win. I was thinking that, I was a little nervous about my pick after I made it. I picked Texas to cover the 6.5. I was like, I don't know. Oklahoma coming off the mat after losing to TCU last week and then having Kansas State already. Maybe Oklahoma is going to come back with something for them. And they did not. They did not. Texas dominated on the lines of scrimmage like I had predicted, but then times 10. And, Quinn Ewers, I mean, the dude is special. And, I mean, we just need to get it on the ground floor here because it's not the ground floor anymore, but he's special. And I do think that they're going to end up in the Big 12 championship game big time. And it's going to be playing against probably TCU.
Probably.
So that, we'll get a preview of that game in a couple weeks, I believe. TCU in Texas.
November 12th, TCU in Texas.
Okay. Oh, okay. So
I know that because I pulled up their
end.
schedule to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to defend my pick. I picked Oklahoma plus the points. If you listen to the episode, I did caveat that with I think Texas with Quinn Ewers is the best team in the Big 12.
Yeah.
I think they could blow them out. It was a principal Red River shootout. 7 out of the last 9 were less than a touchdown. The other 2 were no more than 12.
Right.
Well, they broke the trend.
That made me feel bad about my pick. When you gave me all those stats, I was like, I just don't know, man. And my pick was banking on Quinn Ewers playing.
And he did, and boy did he play.
Yeah.
I said in the episode, I think Texas with Quinn Ewers is the best team in the Big 12. And if you think back to last year's Red River shootout and the way they lost that game and like the way it derailed their season, if you thought for 1 second Texas was going to take their foot off the gas,
nope.
When Sark says all gas, no brakes, he meant it in the Red River shootout.
He cut the brake lines. That's what he did.
This is the worst loss in the Red River shootout's history. It's the first time Oklahoma was shut out since 1998.
That's a big deal, man. That's a big deal.
But hey, Oklahoma didn't want Lincoln anyway.
Right.
It's just they didn't want him. It wasn't a breakup. I dumped them first. Anyway, Oklahoma at this point out of the Big 12 race. They've lost 3 games in conference. Bad. You're counting on another team to lose. Like TCU would have to lose like 4 games at this point, or one last team has to lose 3 more games.
At this point, and I'm not trying to be like negative here, but you need to circle the wagons, and they've got wagons there. Circle those wagons and get to a bowl game and improve for next year as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't help that Dylan Gabriel's out. I'll give them that. But man, that defense has a lot of problems. But Texas, I'm looking at their schedule, Daniel. They got Iowa State next week. Then they go to Oklahoma State, to Kansas State. They host TCU. They go to Kansas and they host Baylor. I mean, what's your thought right now? What's Texas's record at the end of the season? They're 4-2 right now.
I mean, 10-2.
10-2, baby.
We're coming off of this, and I'm just like, it's super recency bias. I think after watching Quinn Ewers play against Alabama, I thought, wow, this is much. It just gave me a lot more confidence in him and their whole, just all the parts move better when he's there. And I've seen all I need to see with the front 7 and the offensive line. We know what Bijan Robinson is in the backfield. And
I think we forgot that Quinn Ewers was the highest rated QB prospect ever.
Yeah.
Ever. He's lived up to that so far. Texas, and it's a running joke. Are they back? They look good right now. Ohio State killed Michigan State. Ole Miss covered against Vandy, and Lane Kiffin punched it in with like 30 seconds left. Lane Kiffin knows what the point spreads are. Arizona State upset Washington. That's 2 back-to-back losses after Washington climbed to 15 in the polls. Any thoughts on any more games? I mean, I'll open the board to you, man.
I'll at least mention Georgia Tech taking care of Duke in overtime. Georgia Tech 2-0 since they fired Jeff Collins. Brent Key might be the answer. And these are 2 relatively, I'm putting in quotes, good ACC teams. So, Pittsburgh was ranked, and they they have some wins on their resume, and they're a tough team. And then now Duke. I mean, Duke has played well this year in Elko's system, and just I've been impressed with Duke this year. They've been a team that
Really
you and I
impressed.
have both been like, we dogged them out at the beginning of the year, and then they had a great start. I do, and based on what I've seen so far, I think Duke is going to have some more wins on their schedule and have a good, finish to the season. So, they came in as 3 points favorites against Tech, and Tech just grinded out another W. And so, I mean, you can tell that they're fighting for this coach, and he's cleaned up a few of their procedural issues that they're having specifically on punt. Um, I read something where I hadn't watched a ton of their punts this year, but they've had 4 blocked. Georgia Tech did. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but they've had 4 punts blocked, and that's a lot for 4 games at the time. And they were doing a bunch of motion right before the punt, and then sprinting and doing a rugby style punt. And so they've kept getting them blocked, and they didn't know why. Brent Key, the first thing he does is he stops the motion on the punt, and they just line up and kick it. And they've had a good average so far, a good hang time so far, and have had no punts blocked. So it's amazing how something little like that has a big, measuring stick as far as keeping you in a ball game. So,
Yeah.
shout out to Georgia Tech. Impressed.
I gotta say, shout out to Oregon, has won 5 straight since that opening loss against Georgia, and they've won big in most of their games. They go on the road to Arizona, who decent team, and Tucson, a place they haven't won since 2011. They went 49-22. And is there a bigger winner than Bo Nix? Bo Nix
Yeah.
today was 20 of 25 for 265 yards through the air, and then added 70 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, he's going to be able to do things that he would have never been able to do at Auburn. Like he's going to have the potential to play for a Pac-12 championship. Has a really good shot at it. Maybe a Rose Bowl. Maybe there's a lot of things that he can do this year that maybe he would have just been middling at Auburn, losing to Georgia and Alabama and everything like that. So I'm excited for Bo. He's gotten beat up a lot over his career, so it's exciting for someone who former 5-star to kind of get his shot at just playing major college football and playing it at a high level where he's going to get recognition.
Their schedule, I was pulling it up. Sorry. Okay, I was seeing. So UCLA beat Utah today.
Mm-hmm.
So UCLA and USC both undefeated
Right.
atop the Pac-12. So Oregon schedule, they have a bye week this next week. Then they play UCLA. And same thing with UCLA. They have a
That's
bye week.
huge.
Uh,
Huge game.
Oregon still has
Will game day be
UCLA.
there?
Maybe.
That's a good one.
It's at Oregon. So a lot more likely to be game day at Oregon than UCLA.
Oh yeah, because there actually be fans.
Right. There will be fans. And really, really passionate fans. So Oregon's got UCLA as far as good teams go. UCLA, Washington, Utah, Oregon State. That's on the schedule. They only have 1 loss. How many losses they have at the end of the season?
I think they lose one of those games,
I think so too.
but I don't think that's
10 to
it.
2.
I don't think that that's unreasonable. I think it's important which game they lose. Like what you've mentioned, if they lose to UCLA, that's going to be an important tiebreaker down the stretch.
Yep.
So that game's very important for them to win. If they lose to Utah, but Utah's already got a couple losses that may not equate to much in the final standings. But Utah is good enough to get them on that day. So I could see maybe Utah getting them or UCLA or Oregon State. Oregon State struggled a little bit. The Fighting Jonathan Smiths have not quite lived up to it the past couple of weeks, but yeah. One other game I'll mention is Notre Dame getting a big win against BYU this week. I think that was a something that they were looking for to kind of give them a little more credibility. It's a ranked team, and BYU has had a pretty good year so far. Notre Dame has been tough sledding to start the season, so definitely good for Marcus Freeman getting the win column there. maybe get some momentum, have a good finish to this season.
Daniel, I'm tapped out. I don't have much more to say on this week. Wasn't a whole lot of crazy upsets, but another just solid week of college football. So
good in every window too. That's always the best when you have something good to watch at every window.
Yeah.
So felt like we were taken care of all day.
Love it. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.